Apologies to anybody who comes in. I'm just testing things. All right. I hear myself. I can. Oh, that's very exciting. That worked. It seems to, at least. You can tell me, anybody who happens by. I very professional setup. Okay. That doesn't look too terrible as far as I can tell. Hello, whoever it is that just. Getting a few things tweaked here. Making sure I understand how everything fits together. Bear with me just a minute. Oh, I see. Okay. Neat. This doesn't look super professional, but it works. I've got light. That's growth. Hey, how's it going? Good to see you here. Thanks for joining me. To figure out how I can see who is in the feed while also this is I don't know if any of you have used Twitch before, but it's a lot more complicated than you might expect. There's a lot of components here that seem to only barely fit together, or at least the way that I've learned. And everything requires a certain level of technical and software capability. And that's not super obvious when you're just looking at it from the outside. To me, looking at all of this, I had a big Dunning-Kruger effect sort of thing where I knew so little that I didn't know the sheer depth of what I didn't know. And I thought for certain this would be a relatively simple thing to put together. And it is kind of, if you use a certain approach, like an online only approach where it's all cobbled together for you. And that version typically has like paid tiers. I, being myself, I tend to like to figure out how things work from the root level and then work my way back up to the surface, eventually, hopefully, into functional. And I'm like almost at the surface is where I'm at, where I kind of sort of get what people are doing. I just don't know how to do it myself yet. So that's where I'm at so far with Twitch. And consequently, I'm fairly certain that you can hear me. Maybe not. Can you hear me? Anybody who's in there, maybe type in the chat box real quick and just let me know that I'm coming through. I think I heard myself. Hey, how's it going? I think I heard myself. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks very much. Oh, and cool. Over on the side of the screen there, when you did an emoji, it made the emoji come through. That was what I wanted to happen. I didn't know what it would look like, but that was neat that it actually. This is fun. I don't think the latest subscriber thing is. Followers thing is up there, but it's not showing. See, there's a lot to this. It's very sophisticated. I have, going through all of this, I have a whole lot more respect for the diversity of people who have managed to put together functional streams on things like Twitch and then produce all different sorts of content. I thought it's a group of entertainers and they're being entertaining and they set up a camera and that's all you have to do. That's not the case. Very much. My plan today frame, but maybe I'll go rogue. My plan is to take some of the questions that I received. I posted about this on Instagram, and I received maybe a dozen, maybe a dozen or so questions from there. But then anybody who comes in as well, please feel free to ask your questions, and I'll prioritize what's here live. But the idea is that this will save, theoretically at least, so that it can be played later, like a YouTube video. So then anytime if somebody wants to come hear the answers to their questions from elsewhere or wants to revisit it for some reason later, can. There's stream all questions and act as if I'm talking to in the future who's listening to this. But then otherwise, if you are here presently listening to this live, please do ask a question if you have one. And also take a moment to let me know where you are from, where you're watching this video from. One of my favorite things about doing the kind of work that I do is that I get to engage with folks from all around the world. And that's a constant thrill for me, getting to hear different people, different perspectives, different experiences on the ground. But it's also neat, I think, to share it with other people who don't necessarily get the emails that I get and get the messages that I get across social media. So this is one way that we can hopefully interconnect some of these threads and allow everybody to feel like they're part of a larger global network more of the time. There's the little, no, there's the little icon. Some of the speech is coming in and out. Okay. That's good to know. I wonder, I've got a fairly, that was something was trying to figure out here. I've got a fairly stern filter on here for noise suppression. I'm going to turn that off. Basically, I've got a noise gate so that you don't hear the heater that I've got running. It's pretty cold here in Milwaukee right now. But I also had noise suppression just in case there was any loud sounds. But I've got a limiter as well, so I think that'll do it. So hopefully, let me know if that keeps happening. It may just be user error, because this mic is dynamic, and so it tends to cut out a lot of stuff that's not directly in front of it, which is why I like it, because I tend to record things in untreated, non-acoustically treated spaces. But let me know if that is any better. Oh, good. Okay, so that was, oh man, we're progressing. This is learning in action. That's what's happening. Thank you for that. So all of that said, do let me know where you're from. Definitely, we've got Boston already. That's great. I love Boston. And then let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to jump in and answer some of the questions that I got on Instagram. And I've got a couple of the simpler ones that I've moved up to the top here. First is, how old are you? I actually find myself having trouble remembering this at some point because I was 34 when the pandemic started. And that was, I mean, in the US at least, the pandemic officially started in a lot of people's minds like mid-March. There was a confluence of different things, like the NBA shut down their season and Tom Hanks got it, and there was a bunch of things. Trump shut down travel from Europe all on the same day. I think it was the 14th. That's when it landed in people's collective psyche in the US. My birthday is in April, so about a month after that, I turned 35. And then since then, I've had another birthday. So now I'm 36. I'm not sure it's fair that all of the pandemic years count as their full amount, though, because time, it's an accordion under these circumstances. It just expands and contracts in very strange ways. And I find myself looking back at things that happened at the beginning of 2001. First of all, it's weird to think that 2001 is over now, but looking back to the beginning of 2001, and it seems like an entirely different lifetime, much less going back to the early days of 2020. So I feel like I should get some kind of beneficial rounding down, maybe. But officially, according to the stars and the Gregorian calendar, I'm 36 years old. Let me know that too. Anybody who's in here, drop your age in the chat box if you feel comfortable doing so. Gregorian calendar age or pandemic adjusted age, your choice, just to get a sense of what age people in this chat. I know Twitch tends to bring in a certain demographic, but my suspicion is that something like this bring in a radically different demographic from the normal one. Yeah, okay, wonderful, great. 30s, 40s, excellent. That's actually something else that I really love about doing the work that I do, and the the audience that I've been fortunate to accumulate over the years just around different things that I do, is that the age demographic, the all demographic actually, of people who listen to my work and read my work and come out to my talks, it's 90 years old and teenagers and sometimes younger. I love that there's that span, that scope of different demographics and different types of people, different backgrounds, different belief systems, different political beliefs, different faiths. I feel like we're better when we have more exposure to different sorts of people. And I also feel like it's very, very easy to, not consciously, but to subconsciously seek out and build stronger relationships with people who are more like us, or who we perceive to be more like us. Oh, that thing does work. Look at that. Okay, neat. And so whenever possible, I think that it's good to put in the effort to create systems and habits and rituals, but also just to build things in our lives that make it more likely that we will expose ourselves to different people outside of that kind of easy sort of relationship that we slide into if we don't pay attention to it. There's nothing at all wrong with building relationships with people who are like you, but I do think that we tend to benefit more in terms of growth in particular when some of those relationships are not uncomfortable necessarily, but they do force us outside of our typical bubbles, filter bubbles and otherwise. So yeah, so a very, very long-winded answer, a simple question. I am 36 years old. Oh, and the other one, why Twitch? What? So Twitch is interesting. I've been reporting with my news analysis work on Twitch and similar services for a very long time, and I found them to be utterly fascinating. Like even way back in the day when it was Justin TV or whatever, where it was people live streaming and actually carrying around like backpacks with batteries, and they were streaming everything that they did throughout the day. It's very fascinating stuff because it's a flavor of content that is different from anything else that you'll find anywhere else. And when Twitch was kind of recalibrated and made into a video game streaming centric sort of service, and then scooped up by Amazon, it became even more interesting because it really took that type of content to the next level. So that even if you, like me, are not particularly interested in sitting around watching people play video games, you can click on a stream and you'll be pulled in. People are getting very, very good at this sort of content in the same way that TikTok took short form video. And over time, people learned to work with that format and iterated and evolved it in somewhat radical ways to the point where the content is really addictive and very interesting and compelling in ways that you wouldn't necessarily find elsewhere, even on things like YouTube, where they have kind of a Twitch competitor streaming service. But people make different sorts of content for YouTube because it's meant to be watched later. So it's a lot more evergreen content. whereas stuff on Twitch is meant for of the moment content. And so to me, just latently, it's already quite interesting. I also find it interesting because part of what I typically do for a living is give talks in public amongst people where everybody's breathing, and that's not something that you can do. At least it's imprudent in a lot of circumstances to do it during a pandemic of an airborne disease. So while you can technically hold events in some places, and you can do it in a relatively safe way sometimes, especially for smaller events where I'm not hosting the Super Bowl or something, it's going to increase the budget to make all of those accommodations to the point where you can't really do it in a sustainable financially way. So for me, I had to look around and try to figure out other ways to fill that gap. One, in my life, because it's something that I like to do. It's a type of engagement and connection that I like to have with people. And it's a medium that I can't match with any of the other things that I'm doing right now, even though I have a variety of mediums through which I present the work that I do. But it's also, it's a way of connecting and of getting a type of feedback and of seeing immediate response to the work that you're doing, which is something that you can't replicate, especially when you're writing a blog post or sending out an email or creating a podcast that nobody else will hear for a week, after you finish it. So to have that immediate feedback is something that I'm very interested in as well. I'm also just curious to learn things. Hey, how's it going? I'm also just curious in general when I find something that's somewhat inexplicable, where I feel like I understand aspects of it and find aspects of it fascinating, like Twitch and video game streaming and live streaming in general. But it's not something that I know enough about to actually do it and do it well. There's a part of my brain that's like, oh, but that would be fun, right? Like it would be interesting to learn about the tech, to learn about the technique, to learn about the systems, to learn about the strategies behind it, even if it's not something that you end up doing long term. That type of knowledge can be fun and interesting and rewarding and fulfilling to pursue, just as a collection of knowledge. And there's a lot there because this is the type of thing that you can look from the outside and see that it's complex and sophisticated and compelling in a lot of different ways. So there's a lot of meat on the bone. There's a lot to get into there. But it's also something that, again, even if you don't end up doing it long term, it could be useful and transferable. It could be convertible into something else at some point down the line. So this type of engagement, especially in a world where now a lot of people are moving remote with their work, a lot of people are consuming more stuff, physical stuff, but also entertainment stuff online. It seems like it might be a useful overarching meta skill to have a better grasp of how to do real-time things like this in an age where more of us are spending more of our time in these types of settings. Now, I don't know if we will have like a metaverse type of situation at some point. I kind of hope not, or at least not the Facebook version of it. That seems kind of dystopian to me. Hopefully it's more blended and we can still have real world stuff going on in addition to all the online potentiality and connections that we can build in that way. But it does seem like a lot more of this sort of thing will be in our future, one way or another. So even though Twitch is not something that is a natural hangout spot for me, it is something that I think is interesting. And I think there's a lot of utility in this type of skill set, in understanding what goes into it, and in taking a bit of time just to fumble around in the dark, basically, is what I'm doing, in order to learn a bit more about it on a practical level. So then I can determine, one, do I want to take it to the next level and invest a bit more time, energy, and resources into it to learn yet more, to crest another hill, see what's beyond that horizon? Or is it something where I can learn a bit and then take that and move to something else because it's clearly not a good fit? That, by the way, if anybody here uses Twitch or watches a lot of stuff on Twitch or themselves as a streamer, please say something in the comments, or please feel free to email me and just tell me what I might do better or some obvious mistakes that I'm making. If I accidentally did something correct, that would also be good to know. Basically, I'm collecting information here. I'm taking something that I know how to do, which is speaking and answering questions, and I'm hoping that eases some of the bitter taste of me not knowing what I'm doing in terms of the technical side of things and how to operate within this type of platform. Um, 25 from France, wonderful, welcome. No, I don't think anybody here is going to be a jerk. Again, great age demographic, like a great scope of different demographics here. I love it. I love that most mornings when I wake up, I have at least 10 or 20 emails from readers and listeners, and sometimes more than that if I've been on TV or done something that's not gone viral necessarily, but something that's spread and gotten more eyeballs on it. And I just have this inbox full of messages from people telling me where they're from, what they're doing, usually some kind of hope and aspiration as well, something that they're planning on doing. I love it. I get to hear from people at moments when they're recalibrating and when they're at some kind of pivot point in their life. And it's just so fulfilling for me. And it's awe-inspiring to a certain degree as well. Like it really keeps my battery levels high. And I love being the person that gets to cheer for people too at these different moments in their lives. I'm the stranger on the internet that sends encouraging emails for a lot of people. And I love getting to do that. And I love that it's such a diversity of people as well. Let's see. I've got more questions here from Instagram. And again, if you have any questions here on the live stream here in real time, please feel free to ask. But in the meantime, and this is one that I actually get asked quite a lot. It's not the most common question I get, but it's one of the top 5 probably. And it's funny because I usually get asked this question by people who like listen to one of my podcasts or they read my work or something. They engage with something that I do. Hey, welcome. England 23. Yes. Tell England I say hi. It's been too long. And so I get asked this question by people who know something about what I do. But the question is, what do you do for a living? And it's a fair question because especially when, like me, you have a weird internet job where it's not exactly clear what component of what you put out into the world earns you money to pay rent or to buy groceries, it's a fair question. And the answer is a bit complex because I like to fiddle around with a bunch of different things. And sometimes these experiments turn into career paths, and sometimes they're just fun. Like right now, I'm having a blast learning about and writing poetry for the first time since I was in university. And I'm also learning about making digital music through Ableton. And I've played guitar and sing, and I've done that since I was like 15. But doing it digitally and doing loops and sampling and things like that, mastering and mixing, very, very different. Love that. Have no idea if those will turn into anything I ever make money from, but I enjoy the process of learning such things. But the same was true previously with doing audio work. I initially got into podcasting because I recorded some audiobooks for books that I had written. And they were bad. I'm actually in the process of going through and re-recording some of my old audiobooks because listening to them today, they're just a travesty. I didn't really know what I was doing. But I got into podcasting because I thought, well, I know enough, just enough, and I've got some of the equipment I would need to experiment with that, so maybe I'll try it. And now podcasting makes up maybe a fourth to a third of my income. The majority of it from my main podcast, Let's Know Things, which is a weekly news analysis podcast. And I have an ad on that right now, and then I have Patreon supporters for that. And then I have a couple of other podcasts as well, one called I Will Read to You, where I read public domain works, poems and essays and books and things like that. Another called Brain Lenses, which is about the psychological and otherwise lenses that distort and influence the way that we see the world, the variables that cause us to see things in a certain way. One sentence news. where every day I have an email that goes out where I do a quick bit of news analysis with one sentence of summary and one sentence of context for 3 different stories of the day. And that goes out each morning. And when I'm writing that, I record a quick podcast version as well. So I have podcasting that I do. I have books that I've written, a few dozen of those, depending on how you count them, and mostly nonfiction work that brings in the majority of income from that. That's royalties over time. It's not tons of money, but it's money. And then typically I have public speaking as well, which tends to be irregular, but those are larger lump sums of money that you get paid by conferences or universities, or in some cases, for me at least, going on tours where you then do 50 talks in, a couple of months. It's grueling, but awesome. It's amazing to meet so many people, but typically that's part of my income stream as well. And that's in addition to an abundance of other things. I have a newsletter that I put out that has an essay and then some updates and things like that. Sometimes I get donations from that, and depending on the month, sometimes the donations can be good grocery money, essentially, for the month. So it's a combination of different things, but it ebbs and flows over the course of each year, really. And I don't want to say struggle, but the goal, the aspiration that thankfully so far has worked out, is to make sure that it's balanced and that it remains balanced. And I'm not wealthy, and I'm probably not going to get wealthy off of the work that I do, but it allows me to do what I do and put some money away, and I'm grateful for that. And I want to make sure I'm able to continue doing so. And that includes when I'm continuing to work through a pandemic that takes away one leg of the stool that I'm sitting on. I want to make sure I'm able to continue doing that. So there's this business model that I have right now, this version of it, will no doubt continue to ebb and flow. And maybe I'll do virtual things online. Maybe I will become a famous video game streamer. I don't know. I would actually play games on here, but I would want to do it in a way, and I think you can do this, where you play, I think they're simple games, like Mario Kart style games, with the people who are watching. Like, I would love that. I would play games with you guys. So if we can figure out a way to do that, that would be awesome. Whether or not that becomes a career move, Dan. So let's figure that out. Let's see. I've got these other questions from Instagram here. Please do feel free to ask if you have any questions in the chat there. Let's see. This is I get asked versions of this fairly frequently, and I understand why. And the question basically is, how many things should I own? I'm paraphrasing. How many things should I own to be a good minimalist? And are there any things that I should absolutely not own, no matter what? Are there things that a minimalist does not own? I get why people ask this question. It's unfortunate because minimalism has a lot of different definitions depending on what space you're operating in. My background's in design, and within design, there's such a thing as minimalism, and it has to do with the hierarchy and composition on the page and the color palette that you use. Basically, it's reducing the number of elements that people have to take in on the page. That's a very different thing. So is architectural minimalism, there's philosophical minimalism. The minimalism that we're usually talking about here, and that I tend to, okay, have fun playing Dominion. The minimalism that I tend to be asked about and that I'm talking about here is the minimalism that relates to possessions and actually like what we have in our life to a certain degree, but a lot of it orients around possessions because that tends to be the most tangible manifestation of the concept. It's the kind of Marie Kondo or the minimalists style minimalism, and a lot of it centers, at least at first, on stuff. And I think the reason for that is, one, stuff is a essentially physical manifestation of what we have going on in here. And so it's a very easy thing to address. And it's usually the first thing that we notice when we're a bit scattered and overwhelmed and not quite sure what we're doing or how to get to where we want to be. And that the stuff in our lives adds to that stress, and it seems like a visual indicator of what's happening intangibly in our brain with our consciousness, psyches. The unfortunate thing, though, is that even though that can be a good entryway, is that in a lot of cases we don't necessarily go past that. My light just changed dramatically there. Why? We don't necessarily go past that point of saying, oh gosh, I've got a lot of stuff, I need to reduce it. And we might even go through the entire process of winnowing away at our collection of items in our homes or in our storage units, wherever, and then wonder why that doesn't actually get us anywhere. Well, that can take some of the baggage off, and especially if you change your consumption habits and stop consuming so much stuff, as opposed to just getting rid of things, you also don't continue to compulsively almost accumulate things. That can help with a whole lot of things, including financial issues in your life. But in a lot of cases, minimalism, at least as I tend to think of it, and what I consider to be the most valuable component of it, is really about focus. And that's focus with every aspect of your life. It's figuring out what's important to you, and then committing to spending more time, energy, and resources, including money, on the most vital things. And then you spend less on those non-vital things. And I mean, what that has done for me, as one example, is that I get to play around with things like Twitch, and I get to write poetry, and I get to fiddle around with making digital music. And I can do this because I freed up a whole lot of time each week, time that I used to spend trying to earn a whole lot of money that I wasn't spending on anything important. And that was taking me closer to a professional goal that once I analyzed it, I didn't actually want. It was something that it was a goal that I had inherited to a certain degree from culture, from people in my life, very well-meaning people who wanted a certain type of success for me. But when I actually stepped back and asked myself what I wanted, time. I wanted to be able to just sit around and read all day if I wanted to. That to me is just the epitome of luxury. And that was something that I could never do with my life before I started to focus on what was important to me. And so when people ask questions like this about, what is the correct number of things, or what is the right brand to have for a minimalist, or which computer should I get, which phone should I get, there's no right answer. I mean, there's no absolute right answer. There's a right answer, or a more right and a less right answer for you. But that's not something that should be informed by what I have to say about it. I mean, I could tell you anything. I could give you an answer. It won't be an answer that will do anything for you. And so ideally, and this is usually, I say something like this when I get this kind of question, rather than fixating on the stuff, I mean, that's a component of it for a lot of us, so don't ignore it. But rather than focusing on that, take the time to take a step back and say, but who am I actually? What do I want actually? What is vital? What fills me with joy? And if I can't answer this, how might I expose myself to more things and more people and more experiences that allow me to taste test more things and sample more things so I can figure out what is important? Because a lot of us don't have that necessarily, or a lot of us have kind of sort of things that we sort of like, but it doesn't seem like something that we can cultivate into a real passion. And that's okay too. That's very, very common. So rather than asking about the number of things you should own, which is 127, there's no right number of. I own more than that right now. I probably have more than that in my kitchen right now. The right number of things will change based on you, based on your circumstances, and that's okay. Just the idea with stuff in your life and minimalism is don't buy stuff just to buy stuff. Don't buy stuff because somebody convinced you that it will solve all your problems. Don't buy stuff because you're bored. Don't buy stuff because it's an activity, even if it's a common social activity that everybody seems to think is normal. it's okay not to partake. It's like if everybody around you is doing some kind of drug, you don't necessarily have to take the drug. You don't have to go around berating them for doing it. I mean, it's a normal thing, but you don't have to take it yourself. So choose to inject or not inject any number of possessions into your life. Fine, but if you inform those purchasing decisions with deeper meaning and understanding about who you are personally, you'll tend to be happier with those purchases. Not 100% of the time. You'll tend to, and you'll tend to make better decisions about other things. Pardon me. I'm still recovering. I've had since what day is it? God, it's the second. Since the 17th, I've had like a cold. And I say it's a cold because it feels like the winter cold that I get most winters. And that I had like a sore throat for a couple of days, and then my nose was super clogged. And it seemed to go away shortly after I got a COVID test to make sure that that's what wasn't what it was. And it was negative. But it's stuck around, and it's very small. Like, it's not something that dominates my life, but I'm still producing impressive amounts of mucus, and I'm still waking up all clogged up, and it feels like I've got a 25% cold now. And I don't know if that's something that just colds do when you haven't been around people enough, and so you haven't developed the antibodies that you typically get just from being amongst society, or if it is something where I got COVID and I've got my vaccinations and my booster, so the likelihood of anything more substantial than a cold happening is pretty low for me. So it could be COVID and it just didn't show up on the tests because Omicron in particular is not showing up on a lot of the tests except within a very narrow window. So I don't know what's going on right now, but if I'm coughing or chortling or hopefully not spewing anything at the screen, that's what's going on. Sorry about that. Apologies in advance. That's why I've got my hot water with the lemon here. Okay. Who is your idol? I have trouble with this question. And I think it's a me thing, because I think it's generally, I have a lot of people that I look up to, and a lot of people that I've learned just an immense amount from. My parents in particular. I won the parent lottery. I've got a wonderful mom and a wonderful dad, wonderful siblings too. But my parents in particular, they're good lodestones in terms of just helping me and my siblings, supporting us and encouraging us to tread our own trails and everything that you would hope like a storybook collection of parents would do. So they're marvelous and wonderful. I've had some very interesting and educational, very niche mentors in my life as well, with different aspects of what I'm doing, who have taught me a great deal and did so out of the goodness of their hearts usually. So I find that very encouraging and impressive and inspiring as well. But I don't have like the one person. And I think usually when people are asking this, they're asking like, who's that person that you want to be? And I not only do I not have that person, I'm not sure that it's like a great thing to aim for necessarily, because we've got those people already. We have that person. And ideally, I think we take what we've got and we, sand down some of the bad bits, sharpen some of the odd edges, become more ourselves over time, like a better version of ourselves according to whichever standard of better we might want to use. But I don't think it's necessarily great to like try to take you and shape yourself into that other person. Like, I understand wanting to go for certain types of accomplishment. I would like to be the person who is the best at this. I would like to be the best archer, the best gamer on Twitch. I would like to be the best artist, the best ballerina, whatever it might be. I could see that. But to say, here's this one ballerina, and she does this so perfectly, and I want to be her, I don't think she would encourage you to do that either, because it's not interesting and not necessarily valuable societally for us to have another carbon copy of that person. So to try to copy that person doesn't make sense. But it doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of accomplishing that thing that you want to accomplish either. Because again, we have that person. And if you try to do exactly what they're doing in exactly the same way, you will be compared to the original. And that seems like setting yourself up for disappointment. Whereas if you come at it from a different angle, you add something different to the pot, your own special blend of personal seasoning to whatever it is that you're doing, I think we all benefit more, and you get to be yourself and cherish those things about yourself rather than diminishing the things that are good about yourself that don't line up with this other person's, this idol's attributes. And I think society benefits too because we see a different version. We see accomplishment of a kind that looks different and that feels different and that takes us to a different place. I don't know, that might be an unpopular opinion, and there might be very good arguments against that, but I might be biased because I don't have an idol. So maybe if I had one, I'd be singing a very different tune, and I'd be saying, yes, we should all try to be this specific ballerina. We should all try to be this ballerina. And I want to be this ballerina, but I don't have that person, ballerina or otherwise, unfortunately. So no idol to divulge other than maybe my parents. They're wonderful people. We're very different people, but I mean, the fact that they've allowed me to be such a different person and continued to encourage me, despite and or because of all of that, that's why they're the closest thing I have to idols. I'd actually be curious if anybody in here wants to sound off. If you do have an idol, you can make your argument for why that's good, but also if you just have somebody that you look up to that much, if you want to type that out in the chat, I'd be curious to see what kind of answers we'd get to that question. And then another one here too. This might be, well, part of it might be a unpopular opinion. Hypothetically, if you have kids, how would you want them to think about college? I have many thoughts on college. So I went to university. I went in like not a big one, not a fancy one. I went to school in Southwest Missouri. When I started going there, it was called Southwest Missouri State University. Now it's just Missouri State University down in the buckle of the Bible Belt in Southwest Missouri. And I mean, I had a pretty good experience. There's upsides and downsides, and I still had debt when I graduated, which wasn't ideal. It was like $30,000 or $40,000, I think. But I feel like I got an okay deal. I mean, obviously, it's better to not have $40,000 worth of debt. And I do think if you're just looking for the learning, if you just want the education, today in particular, there are probably better ways to go about that. If you just want raw materials, I could probably today, not back then because we didn't have all of this stuff, maybe I could get enough CD-ROMs to play on my computer that would teach me some of these things. But most of what I wanted to learn, I couldn't learn from the internet yet because there just wasn't a whole lot on the internet compared to today. But today, I could probably have taken my entire education short the critiques and the feedback from the professors, which were valuable, I think. But just the educational side of things I could get for probably a few $100 and a year of my life if I really focused on it, because it tends to be spread out quite a bit, the educational process at universities. That said, I mean, there's some pretty good research backing this up, that the benefits of going to a university, a lot of them orient around personal development in terms of our social psychology in particular, being exposed to different people, being exposed to different ideas, being forced into collectives that are different from your family and familiar friends. Those sorts of things are very hard to put a price tag on. And I'm not sure the price tag would be $40,000 or more in a lot of cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You could easily say that's a valuable thing, but it's not worth the money that they're asking me to pay for it. Education in the United States in particular has grown abominably over the past 20, 30 years. Folks from prior generations who went to school are shocked when they find out how expensive it is to go to school now. Even when I went to school, what, a decade plus ago, today it's even more expensive. So I think you could go either way. I think it depends on what you're looking for. And I actually saw, totally random, I saw a piece of research earlier today, a study that just came out that indicated that mobsters, people in the mafia who go back to school, tend to increase the amount of illicit income they make by 8% above and beyond their potential income trajectory had they not gone to school. So if you are doing illicit things, if you're dealing drugs or laundering money or part of a mafia family, it might be worth it for that additional 8% to your income. For the rest of us, you could take it or leave it probably. I think there's a lot of other ways to do it. I think the alternatives, some of them are scams, but a lot of them are justified, especially if you can cobble together something on your own. There's a lot of free resources out there that are just incredible. Most of what I learned today, I learned from YouTube or from books that I can get at the library. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that conversation, but I would probably, if I had a theoretical kid, I would definitely try to make them as aware as possible of the pros and cons to both directions, and then allow them to make that choice. Because I think there's a social aspect of it too, where with few exceptions, with a few professions, if you didn't go to school, there's a certain stigma attached within middle-class American society at least, and that might play a role as well in that decision. Oh yeah, okay. So I'm glad somebody agrees with me on the no idol thing at least, or the not one idol at least. Hey Carly, good to see you. Happy New Year. I think that's a good way of dealing with it, Chrysalis. Yeah, I think it's good to, because then you get a larger cross section of people too that you can have respect for, rather than just having one person and saying they are flawless. Well, no. I mean, all of the legends that we build up, they're wildly imperfect people by definition. We all are. And so, to take just one person and put that responsibility on them to be perfect and to be the be all end all is nonsense. Whereas we can pick and choose ingredients from different people and make our own recipe. I think that's much better. Oh, thank you for that. Definitely don't put all that on me, though. I'm glad that there's ultra runners there as well to fill in some of the additional labor of being an idol. Um, that's actually something, speaking of running, another thing that I've been dabbling in recently. My entire life, I haven't been able to run. Um, and I just thought, well, I'm bad at running. I'm terrible at it. In college, actually, when I was at university, I was on the ultimate frisbee team, and we played intercollegiate ultimate frisbee, which, if you're unfamiliar, it's kind of like soccer or football, where it's just running back and forth a lot. And I did it. And we'd do like 10 miles a day, and we'd do sprints, and we'd do drills, and we'd do bleachers, and then I'd just be sick for the rest of the day. And again, I just thought, well, I'm bad at running. I'm just really terrible at this. And I only found out recently, coming back to the US and being stuck here for a bit during the pandemic, and having insurance and having a doctor that I can go to and get things checked out, I found out a slew of things. But one of the things I found out was that I have something called, what was it, exercise-induced brachial constriction? Something like that. Sometimes people call it exercise-induced asthma. It's not technically asthma, but it's similar. And basically what it does is it tightens up and swells up the capillaries and veins in your throat so that when you run or when you exert yourself in a cardiovascular fashion, the kind that you want for working out, it bronchial constriction, it tightens everything up and actually raises your blood pressure dramatically and can make you feel sick and can cause a confluence of other things, a lot of which, fortunately, I didn't have to deal with. But I thought I was just rubbish at running for my entire life. And then he gave me an inhaler, and you puff on it a couple of times, like 15 minutes before running. I could run. And I was still not great at it because I hadn't built up my legs and everything else that you need to build up. But then I just started running every single morning, and it was glorious. And then being in Milwaukee, though, I think it's in the teens maybe out there right now. It's quite cold. It's below freezing. Um, Once it gets below about 50 Fahrenheit, then it doesn't work anymore. I found out, unfortunately. And so I actually had to invest in exercise bike I have here in my living room, so I can stay inside where it's above 50 degrees, because apparently the albuterol that I puff on before running doesn't work. So although I love cold weather, and I've been waiting for this type of weather since I moved here. When I arrived, it was hot and humid, and I felt ripped off. Now I'm finally snow on the ground, and it's cold, and it's supposed to get down to the single digits soon, and I love it. But I can't run at the park across the street right now, so I'm a little bit sad about that. I'm still far from being an ultra runner, basically, but I am enjoying the hell out of the 3 miles or so a day that I was doing before the cold finally set in. Oh yeah. Oh, so it is in the 20s. I know that we're supposed to get it. Carly's here in Milwaukee as well, and I know we're supposed to get down to like 7 or 8 degrees in a couple of days, I think, but we'll see. They keep promising me things, and I'm only just now getting the snow. See about. Let's see here. So that was the kids' question. Organizing notes here. Huh. How many, pardon me, how many books do you read each year? How can I read more? I read really slowly, and it's discouraging to finish so few books. So I personally read, it depends on the books, but I generally read a couple of books a week. But it really does depend on the books. Like, for instance, I generally read fiction before going to sleep. And right now I'm reading a book that's just like a brick. And it's a Neil Stevenson book, and his books are just, they take ages to get through. And they're delightful, but they take ages to get through. So I've been working on that one for several weeks already, and I've probably got another week or two before I finish it. But then I read nonfiction during the day. And recently I've been reading a lot of poetry books as well. And then I've typically got a nonfiction book going as an audiobook at the same time. And so generally I'll plow through a couple of nonfiction a week, and then sometimes an additional fiction one in there as well. But they all play different roles in my life, and I try to space them out so that I can sit down and read a book in between other things that I'm doing, as I find it helps me kind of flip a switch and pivot to a new way of thinking. And this is especially true if I'm doing some kind of very creative work, and then I'm moving into something a little bit more analytical, like something to do with news analysis. It's a different way of thinking, it's a different voice, it's a different style of writing. You have to parse information that you're taking in differently. And so I try to fit the books in between those elements. And then with audiobooks, actually, I'll do it sometimes when I'm working out, or when I go for a walk, when I'm driving anywhere. Those I space in throughout the day as well. So the best advice I would give, though, to anybody who wants to read more, and especially if you don't feel like you read very fast right now, the only way to really get faster, and I know there's a lot of tricks out there people will try to tell you with speed reading tricks and things like this. Most of these have not stood up to research. Like, as soon as they do studies on them, they find that most of them are cons, and then some of them are tricks that allow you to very quickly figure out what's going on. But it's the equivalent of maybe listening to a conversation in a foreign language where you know a handful of words, and you can kind of sort of figure out from the gesticulations and the keywords that you know what they're talking about, but you don't get the details. A lot of speed reading is like that. The only way to really get faster is to read, and to do it as often as you can, and to try not to stress out about it. It's not a race. It's not a competition. You're not better for reading anymore. If you're reading more slowly, actually, you might even be taking in more information and having more of a chance to process that information as you're taking it in. So there's something to be said for that as well. But if you want to read more, the only way to do it is to read more. It's kind of like writing, where people ask, how can I write more and get over writer's block and things? Well, you just have to write all the time, and you'll get, by the very nature of going through that process, faster. But also you won't psychologically inhibit yourself by psyching yourself out about it quite so much. Oh, yeah. Hmm. Sorry about the asthma. I thought about a treadmill. I thought about a, oh, pardon me. I thought about a rowing machine as well, which I thought would be interesting. But I'm in an apartment and I'm on the second floor, and I've been in places before where I've been on the first floor and had people above me with treadmills and with rowing machines and things. And with this building, at least, it's pretty good in terms of insulation, but I didn't want to be that guy who made my downstairs neighbor's life miserable. Uh, so I eventually decided on the exercise bike, one of the magnetic ones, so it's silent when you're using it, and I've got it up on a little cushion too, just in case any vibrations might travel downward otherwise. But yeah, I mean, in general, I miss running a lot, and partly I miss it because, again, my entire life I've just thought that I'm terrible at it, and I haven't been able to enjoy it. And as soon as what, 3 months after I was able to start enjoying it, then I had to stop. Very sad. I guess that's something to look forward to when the snow starts to melt, and I'm sad about the temperature. Then I can be happy about running. Yeah, it has been. Everybody's telling me that. Everybody here in Milwaukee is saying, just wait. You say you like winter. It's going to get bad here, and you might rethink that. And I'm like, oh, we'll see. And it keeps not happening. Apparently, this is a very strange, I think it's a very strange winter everywhere. Record setting snow after record setting drought up in the Pacific Northwest and California. It's the new normal for all of us, I think. Let's see. I think I'm going to answer one or two more questions here. So if anybody has a question, please feel free to mention it in the comments. Otherwise, I'll use these questions here from Instagram. How can I travel for cheap? There's a lot of good like tricks out there just in terms of using credit card points and finding the right websites and such. There's a lot of good websites for that. Nomadicmat.com is one of them, but you can find a whole collection, a whole network of sites like that out on the internet, and it's worth checking them out. I would say more holistically, the big picture stuff that you can do is to try to make sure that you have the freedom to choose, like the flexibility to choose different days. If you're traveling when everybody else is traveling, it's going to be more expensive. Also, probably not as enjoyable. But if you can go during off seasons, if you can go when it's not a holiday, like anything that you can do to deviate from expected travel times, and that includes flying at weird hours, but also showing up to a resort when people don't normally go to that resort. That is a great way to dramatically lower the cost. And I would say too, figuring out why you want to travel and what you hope to get from it is an underutilized way to lower those costs. Because I think for a lot of us, especially if you don't travel very often, it's this romanticized ideal where it's got to be this and it's got to be this. And of course, we're going to do this because, hey, we're going to Paris. So of course, we need to stay near the Eiffel Tower. Well, you could reimagine that though. Like, it's cool if you want to see the Eiffel Tower, it's fine. But if the real reason that you're traveling is to taste the best food in France, or to see the museums, or to go down near the water, then maybe instead of staying in Paris and taking the train to the Mediterranean coast, stay in a little village in the Mediterranean coast and maybe take a day and do that in Paris. There's ways that you can rearrange your travel plans to focus on those most vital things, the things that you actually hope to accomplish. And it will deviate from then the expected norm and the things that they try to sell you, the package deals and things like this. But almost always, one, you'll enjoy it more because it focuses on those most vital things rather than those being an afterthought that's kind of tacked on to the core way of doing things, the expected way. But it'll usually be cheaper too. And partly because you usually then don't have to spend those fees to do the things that like are fine, but that don't really fit in with that most vital collection of things that you want. For me, at least, that tends to work wonders. That combined with being as flexible as possible I get insane ticket deals sometimes and insane stays at like on Airbnbs or hotels because like the hotels are half full, the Airbnbs are just happy to have somebody staying there, and you can go find some weird remote place that nobody goes, and it'll be a very interesting experience compared to staying at that one hotel 3 blocks from the Eiffel Tower. If that's your thing, by all means, there are other ways to save money, but if you want to approach it more holistically, and especially if you're intending to do more travel, it's a good idea to figure out what your intentions are. So then you can spend your money appropriately on those things rather than on things that you're supposed to do, but it's really somebody else's expectations and values that you're spending on. And then I'll do one more here. The most interesting. First place you're going to go after COVID. And I'd actually be curious about you guys too, if you have any places you've been holding off on traveling to. If you have a place that you're planning to go as soon as it's relatively more safe and or comfortable to do so traveling when it's not as much of a pandemic time. For me, I recently became an uncle, a double uncle actually. Both my little sister and little brother and their partners, within 2 weeks of each other, had babies. And these are my first nieces and nephews. So that's exciting. So I don't personally plan on having kids myself. I've always just planned on being the uncle. And so now I get to do that, but I haven't been able to meet them in person yet. And that's partly because just travel, it seems less prudent right now than it would typically be. And I think that will be the case until probably February. If the best case scenarios work out, Omicron might sweep through in 4 to 8 weeks. If the trends that we saw in the UK and South Africa continue, here at least, we'll see. That's not guaranteed. But it does seem to offer some degree of immunity to other variants as well. And so we could be in a much better situation by like February, late February at the latest, if that ends up being the case. So my plan is to go visit my niece and nephew, who I have not met yet, and to visit my siblings there as well, obviously. So that'll take me out to Seattle and down to North Carolina. And for Seattle, I'll probably take the Empire Builder. I mean, I could drive. It'd be like a 4-day drive through some very beautiful country, but it might be a bit much to do for like 8 to 10 hour days driving through Montana and other places that are kind of endless. And the Empire Builder's great. That would be like a day and a half, I think. That's the Amtrak route that goes through that part of the country. And I've taken it several times before. And it's relatively inexpensive, especially if gas prices remain relatively high. Even with a hybrid, it's not cheap to drive long distances sometimes. And then down to North Carolina, I will probably drive, though, because the train routes are a little bit sparser there, and they don't go where I need to go. But yeah, this is clearly something I've been thinking about. I'm very excited to get back on the road and see some things and stop at tacky roadside attractions and stare out the window for long periods of time and do all the things that I've been missing. I'm having fun here. I always find plenty to do, and I'm fortunate to be able to kind of hermit myself up during this period where it's a weird period for a whole lot of reasons. I'm fortunate to be able to manage my way through it the way that I have. But I am very, 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 very much looking forward to some type of new normal falling into place for travel purposes, among others. Those are my plans. Thank you guys so very much for showing up, for coming out to this, coming in, I guess, to this. I appreciate that. You've been wonderful. Thank you very much for helping me get calibrated here too. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna teach those kids things they need to know, the things that their parents are not going to teach them. I'm gonna take them overseas, show them how to get through passport control easily, show them how to bribe a cop, like the stuff you need to know. Thank you guys very much. It means a lot. I appreciate you. And hopefully I'll do another one of these. I might do them every Sunday for a while, and I'll probably be trying out other versions too. If I can figure out a way to play games with people, I'll definitely do that, and it would be great to have you back. I might give a talk at some point, but I'm kind of feeling like this is more of a interactive channel. So I don't know, we'll see. I'm going to be experimenting. So it'd be great to see you back if I do another thing, but either way, I appreciate having you here, and I hope that wherever you are having a wonderful 2022. Wow, so far. See you guys.